Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to War Thunder with Koala. So today we're continuing on with our little series about potential armoured cars and light scout tanks for different nations in War Thunder. Last episode we covered the British with the Staghound, Scorpion and several other potential additions, and today, by your guys' request, we're covering France. Now, the French tech tree in War Thunder is already home to some very nice light tanks and scout tanks, and the first thing I'll say is that unlike Britain and Germany, they're not desperately in need of new scout vehicles. They don't have them at every battle rating, but they do have enough that they're not distinctly lacking in that aspect of the game. However, there are about a dozen fantastic options for vehicles that could be added to the French light tank line, which, if you couldn't tell by the title and thumbnail, they're basically all the Panhard armoured cars, the EBRs and AMDs. Yes, I know, the thumbnail is a World of Tanks image. Yes, I know that seems like clickbait. No, I don't care. Seeing as we're going to spend 85% of this video talking specifically about the Panhard EBR potentially being added to War Thunder, I thought the thumbnail and title were okay, if a wee bit cheeky. I did make sure to put the word discussion in the title because some of you got very upset by my not seeing that in the title of my M1A1HA video, so there you go. If you haven't seen my previous video on potential British armoured cars and scout vehicles, then I highly suggest you go watch that, because there are some really interesting options, and in this video we're going to build somewhat on what was established in that one, so there'll be a link below and on screen if you want to go check that out. Seeing as this video is likely to get a substantial amount of views, however, I thought I'd go back over the adjustments I suggested be made to the spotting mechanic in the last video, and basically go into some more depth and add some things to it. As I said in the last video, the scouting mechanic was a really good idea. I like it, but I feel like far more could be done with it to integrate it more into the game, make it more of a tactical advantage, as well as a viable playstyle. Gaijin has recently nerfed the spotting mechanic into the ground. Even 6.7 light tanks can't scout enemies from any more than wanking distance, so right now it's basically pointless. We're going to fix that. Firstly, I would like the active scouting targets that are then damaged or destroyed by allies to be more highly rewarded with RP and Civil Alliance, so that a player can adopt a purely scouting role and still earn a decent reward at the end of the match. I think for the active scouting targets alone, the reward is fine as is, because if you raise that too high, then you run the risk of people simply flanking the entire map and scouting targets moving out of the enemy spawn, which is of no tactical use to the friendly team and shouldn't be encouraged. It's kind of similar to the reward you get for just taking off or landing in an aircraft. But if the target you've scouted is damaged or destroyed, then the reward could be raised significantly to be more in line with damaging or destroying enemy vehicles yourself. Not quite as high obviously, but maybe 80% of the reward for if you'd have done the damage yourself. Currently, if a scouted target is killed, you do get a good chunk of SL, it's around what you'd get for an assist, but you get something like 50 RP, which is just not enough to make players prioritise it as a part of their playstyle, and you get 0 RP for a scouted target being damaged, which frequently they can be damaged after you scouted them, but not killed by friendlies until after the scouting timer runs out, meaning you get no RP at all for that. Scouting is really nothing but an added bonus for light tanks right now, just a way to gain extra RP and SL, because you can get a lot of assists with your guns often not having quite the punch of a medium or heavy tank of the tier, and thanks to the airstrike modification, it's also a cheap way of getting into an aircraft for close air support, which I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. It would make more sense if you could bail out of an undamaged vehicle without incurring a death and therefore spawn back in the tank after carrying out the airstrike. That's something I've been advocating for quite a while, but similarly to aircraft that can jay out when stationary on the runway in order to change their ordnance loadouts or what have you, and not incur a death or a repair cost, that an undamaged tank or fully repaired tank that is not in direct line of sight or close proximity to an enemy vehicle could bail out safely without dying or losing the vehicle. This makes a lot of sense at top tier. For example, if you're in your Leopard 2A5 but you need to spawn in an aircraft or an SPAA, it's gonna cost you around 25 grand to do it, even if your tank is totally undamaged and there are no enemy tanks anywhere near you. That makes no sense. If aircraft can do it, tanks should be able to as well, all tanks, and allowing for this would make the airstrike modification for light tanks more sensible. The idea that the intelligence that your scouting is providing is being used to call in air support. Basically what I want though is for a good scout to be able to earn just as much SL and RP as a good medium tank player, for instance, but only if his scouting is actually proving useful to the team. That's, I guess, what being a good scout is. This is similar to the spotting damage mechanic in World of Tanks. You can spot 15 tanks, but if nobody on your team is able to shoot at them, then you're not really earning any reward for doing it. If you are spotting the right targets, however, and being a strategic use to your team, you don't even have to fire your gun, and you'll earn just as high a reward at the end of the match. This only works, however, if the team is paying attention to the targets that you're spotting, which often they're not. Currently, when targets are spotted, the tank becomes marked on the map for, I believe, 30 seconds, regardless of how far they move from the location they were pinged at. The tank type is revealed and a chevron appears above the tank in-game. If the scouted target is damaged or killed during this time, then the scout earns an additional reward on top of the tiny silver lion reward you get for just having scouted the target originally. Now, what I said in the last video is that rather than a chevron just appearing over the scouted tank, which often goes unnoticed, a line would be spoken over the radio, "Target spotted," from the same guy who says, "Attention to the map," or "Attack the D-point." What this does is make it far more likely that teammates will pick up on the fact that you've just given them the location of a hostile vehicle and make them far more likely to react to it, which makes scouting far more powerful. It gives the game an additional layer of tactics, especially from the point of view of a tank in a squadron with a light or scout vehicle. This is why in the last video I suggested raising the relative BRs of all vehicles with the scouting ability, and I also suggest giving that ability to the top tier tank destroyers like the Centauro, Type 16 or AMX-10 RC. This is all basically the stuff I went over in the last video, but here's the bit I really wanted to add. Number 1, the range of scouting needs to be increased. I know there's the improved optics modification, but as you can see from this clip, I can't even scout these Panzer IVs, even though I'm close enough to not only tell that they're Panzer IVs, I can even tell instantly what variant of the Panzer IV these are. They're Panzer IV F2s. Crosshair pointed directly on them, press the scout key, nothing. Scouting failed. You can see this in the last episode of the series too in the T-18 Boarhound. Even when closer to the targets, I still couldn't scout them, and this is with the improved optics modification. So I suggest we give scouting unlimited range, but increase the sensitivity, meaning that the crosshair has to be directly on the target and they have to be in direct line of sight. No more scouting targets seconds after they've moved behind solid cover. Now, what does that mean for the improved optics module? Do we simply remove it? Well, no. I think this upgrade could be given a different purpose, that when you have it, rather than simply saying target spotted, the audio line would be, for example, enemy tank destroyer spotted at coordinate C3, like in the case of this VFW here. Basically, when you have this upgrade modification, your scouting provides the team with additional intelligence, telling them what type of tank was spotted and where they are on the map. The only problem I can see with this being that on some maps the grid coordinates are massive and that the entire enemy team could all be in the same square. That can easily be fixed, we just need to make the squares on the grid smaller. I also think that the Keen Vision crew skill would increase the length of time that targets are spotted for, so having it at 5 would spot the tank for 60 seconds, while having it at 0 would merely spot the tank for 10 seconds. At the same time, the awareness skill would reduce the cooldown on your scouting, because we would have to increase the base cooldown on the scouting ability, otherwise it's just going to be too much. We don't want this to turn into arcade mode after all. So that's my little rework to the scouting mechanic explained in a wee bit more detail than last time. Please let me know what you think about it down in the comments section below. And now let's talk about the Panhards. Now, as I said, the French do already have plenty of light tanks and scout capable vehicles, including the Batchat 25T, which I said in the last video could lose the scout ability. Number 1, it was designated as a medium tank, not a light, it's just an exceptionally fast and lightly armoured medium. And number 2, it's not the type of vehicle that needs the scout ability or gets a lot of use out of it. The scouting ability is designed for tanks that can find themselves literally unable to kill an enemy vehicle in their sights and need to call in support to do so, but the Batchat has a very powerful gun and can basically take out anything it's going to see. As such, I also don't think a lot of the French tier 1 light tanks need scouting. I did say last video that tier 1 vehicles could get the scouting ability, it shouldn't be locked off from tier 1, but I do think that only wheeled vehicles at tier 1 should get scouting, and the battle rating 1.3 AMC 35 should be put down in tier 1, the only reason it's tier 2 anyways, because French low tier is so empty, and it should therefore lose its scouting ability. We're going to fill that tier 2 gap with armoured cars and light tanks that will get scouting, and actually have the BRs to justify being tier 2. We're going to be filtering in the light tanks and armoured cars amongst the light tank line that already exists in the tech tree, and we're going to be taking into account the adjusted battle ratings as suggested for British Scout vehicles last video. So if you think I'm placing some vehicles comparatively too high, then remember that I'm going to suggest raising the BRs of all Scout capable vehicles, given that we just made the scouting ability much more powerful and lucrative for the player. So the first French light tank addition I'd like to suggest is the Sommois AMR 39, a 4-wheeled armoured car with a 25mm cannon that I believe would sit at battle rating 1.3. A variant of this cannon can be found in-game already on the Japanese Tier 1 boat, the Type T38. However, the variant used on the AMR 39 is an anti-tank variant, while the Type T38 uses a licensed-produced version of the anti-aircraft gun, designated Type 96 by the Japanese. The Hotchkiss anti-tank cannon used on the AMR 39 would have around 50mm penetration, has an impressive muzzle velocity of just over 900 meters per second, and a fire rate of 15 to 20 rounds a minute, or in other words, a reload rate of 3 to 4 seconds. The vehicle has only 50mm of armour all around, making it easily penetrated by heavy machine guns, and could travel at just under 70 kph on paved roads. This vehicle is similar to the Italian BR 1.3 armoured car, the AB41, which with the rework scouting ability would go up to 1.7. It has a bigger round and more penetration, but only has around half the fire rate of the AB41, as the AB fires 8 round clips in 2 seconds, but then has to reload the clip, which takes around 7 seconds. The AB41 is also slightly slower than the AMR39, although it can reach a higher maximum speed, as it has a third crew member, while the AMR39 has only a 2-man crew. One of the main reasons I've suggested this vehicle first is because it's, I think, the only wheeled vehicle on this list not made by Panhard, but the next vehicle I'm going to mention, the Panhard AMD 178, is near identical, besides the fact that it has a 2-man turret, so either the Sommois AMR 39 or Panhard AMD 178 could be made a premium vehicle. The 178 was the more mass-produced vehicle, carries more history with it, but the AMR 39 is, once again, something on the list not manufactured by Panhard. The Panhard AMD 178B was a variant of the 178 produced with a 47mm SA-35 cannon, seen in-game on the Char B1s. This variant was identical to the previously mentioned 178. It has a top speed of 72 km per hour and a maximum of 20mm of frontal armour, and the gun can penetrate just over 60mm. This is around 20mm less than the British 40mm gun found on the Daimler armoured car, which last video I suggested be raised to 1.7, and it is a big step down in fire rate over the previous armoured cars for only 10mm additional penetration. But I think 1.7 is fair for this car. Remember that the additional size of the round is going to be more important, because as a scout car that will almost exclusively be getting side shots where you don't need the raw penetration as much, you are going to want the post-penetration damage. That's why I suggested in the last episode that the British armoured cars with 75mm guns be placed above their 57mm armed counterparts, even though the 57mm gun is technically a better gun. A wee bit of a different looking vehicle now, the Panhard 201 AM40P was a radical design for a heavy armoured car, similar to the T18 Boarhound we played out in the last episode. An 8-wheeled car with a maximum on-road speed of 80 km per hour, the original AM40P equipped the same 25mm cannon, but featured very capable armour, up to 40mm sloped on the frontal hull, with a pike nose that angled that armour even further, raising its effectiveness to over 60mm. The rest of the tank featured only 15mm, but with a prototype variant being upgunned to use the 47mm cannon with over 60mm penetration, this vehicle could be put up as high as battle rating 2.0. Given that the vehicle was never mass produced or entered into service, Panhard just couldn't get factories ready to build the thing before the Nazis invaded France, I thought to suggest that this vehicle be made an event vehicle, as its design carries some weight to it. You may have noticed that the two centre wheels are steel rollers rather than tyres, similarly to Panhard's famous EBR. That's right, after being unable to produce the vehicle as a heavy armoured car for the Second World War, Panhard returned to the design in the late 1940s and eventually would turn it into the EBR-75, mounting onto it the oscillating turret of the AMX-13 light tank. This right here is the design that started it all. Now for a tracked vehicle, a prototype of the AMX-13 fitted with the 105mm howitzer seen on the battle rating 2.7 I believe M4A3 105. This is not the self-propelled artillery variant of the AMX-13, which is also fitted with a 105mm gun. This American-made howitzer fires a heat round with 130mm penetration at any range, but takes more than 10 seconds to load. This would put the AMX-13 105 at battle rating 3.3, a solid tier 2 for the French light tank line. Another variant of the AMX-13 for the same tier 2 battle rating 3.3, these early models fitted the turrets of American M24 chassis. Now, I believe with the reworked scouting mechanic, both the M24 and early AMX-13 with the FL11 turret should be raised to 3.7. Honestly, France should probably get a premium M24 as well. But this Frankenstein tank combines the worst of both, with the inferior mobility of the early AMX-13 and the higher profile, lower armoured turret and worse turret traversing of the M24. It does retain the 50 cal secondary machine gun and the better elevation angles, and I'm not certain, but it might have had the chassis gun stabilizer, and technically speaking the AMX-13 is capable of a few kph higher top speed, but you'll never hit that, and with around 8 kph lower average speed and worse mobility, the M24 AMX-13 would make a good 3.3. And surprisingly enough, this was not confined to prototypes, with the model being mass-produced and later sold to Algeria, Argentina, and Israel. Now we get onto the main series of additions for this video. Finally! The Panhard EBR is an 8-wheeled armoured reconnaissance vehicle capable of 100 kph in both forward and reverse, and can actually be driven from both front and back. It has 2 drivers. The tank retains the decent armour of the AM40P prototype we mentioned earlier, which the EBR is based off, but that armour is going to be practically irrelevant by the sort of tier this vehicle will sit at, probably 4.7. The initial variant of the EBR featured the FL11 turret seen on the earliest AMX-13 in-game, meaning only just over 100mm penetration thanks to the SA-49 cannon, which limits its battle rating. Interestingly, the 4 central steel wheels of the EBR are capable of being raised or lowered on the move for greater on-road speed or off-road manoeuvring respectively, and what this basically means is that the vehicle doesn't lose much mobility when going off-road, making it one seriously competitive vehicle despite its comparatively low penetration for 4.7. I'd be really interested to see how Gaijin would model the raising and lowering of the wheels, if they give us 2 separate drive modes, or, knowing Gaijin, possibly just make the wheels constantly raised or constantly lowered. I don't know, I think it would be a really interesting mechanic to see them implement, and they'd probably just have to give us a keybind for it, and I don't know, I want to see how they do it, and I think that's possibly one of the reasons this vehicle hasn't been implemented into the game already. The next variant of the EBR was difficult to find a balanced spot for, as it swapped out the FL11 turret for the FL10 one seen on the BR 6.0 AMX-13, and that means the more powerful SA-50 75mm cannon, which almost doubles the penetration to over 200mm. Now, this isn't huge. I mean, the M4A4 SA-50 has that much penetration at 4.7, which, honestly, that vehicle should be 5.3. It's better than the 76mm Shermans in the US tree. But even with the reworked scouting, the AMX-13 is one of few vehicles I don't think should be moved up, as it kinda should be 5.7 right now anyway, so 6.0 is the correct place for it. The Panhard with this round though would probably be 6.7, taking the Batchat spot, which would move over into the medium tank line before the Lorraine 40T and lose its scouting ability, like I mentioned earlier. Possibly it could be 6.3, the Panhard that is, given the relatively small gun. It all depends on testing, and of course all these BRs can be played around with, they're not set in stone. Just remember guys, this would all have to be play tested and then implemented on a dev server. We can check out the battle ratings and see where these vehicles belong, before actually giving us finalised battle ratings in game, and even then they can all be changed around. Please give us battle ratings above 10.0 Gaijin. The next variant up for the EBR is the 1966 variant, replacing the SA-50 75mm cannon for the D921 90mm gun. I would place this vehicle only a slight step up at battle rating 7.0, and the reason for that is that even given the much bigger cannon, this is not the same gun found on the AMX-1390 for example, or the RU-251 say. This is a much less powerful 90mm, similar to the one seen on the AMX M4, although it has a lower velocity, meaning that it might not even make any improvement in penetration over the 75mm gun. It's at this point that I should say that the AMX-13 SS11 Premium would go up to 7.0, while the AMX-1390 would go up to 7.3. Also at 7.0 would be the tracked ELC, which could come in multiple variants. Firstly, the AMX ELC BIS, which features a low-velocity 90mm gun similar to the one found on the RU-251 or M56 Scorpion, both of which would move up to 7.0. The ELC BIS also fired basically the same rounds, aka a 320mm penetrating heat FS, although with a lower velocity, meaning it will be more difficult to aim accurately at long ranges. The ELC was a design for an air-transportable light tank that would be even smaller and lighter than the AMX-13, and it was actually so small that the placement of crew meant that the turret couldn't be traversed more than 40 degrees to each side when on the move. When stationary, it could achieve a full 360 degrees traverse, however, and once again, I'd be really interested to see how Gaijin might model this. The ELC Evan 90, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, fixed this problem by including an oscillating turret, less conventional overall, but more in line with other French tanks of the time, and moving the 90mm gun over to the far right hand side of the turret, allowing the crew members to sit a little bit more spaciously. Due to the ability to traverse the turret 360 degrees while driving, I think this tank would probably sit at battle rating maybe 7.3. The ELC is capable of a top speed of 80 km per hour, just like the RU-251. However, having such a small silhouette is going to help it tremendously in the scouting role. It's only just over half the height of an RU-251. The AMX-13-105. This is a tank that I'm surprised isn't in the game already. It speaks for itself. It's basically a regular old AMX-13 fitted with a 105mm gun that would likely fire the same shells as the AMX-30 at battle rating 7.7, and I think would fit in nicely at that BR. These tanks are still in use today, firing APFSDS shells of course, but I don't think we should get these on this tank. Perhaps we could get two variants of the AMX-13-105, the first one being the Model 58, and the second one being the Model 87, firing APFSDS, and probably sitting at BR 8.0, depending on how powerful that APFSDS is. I think that would actually work quite well. Now back to wheels, and back to Panhard. The Panhard AML-90 Lynx is a 4-wheeled tank destroyer armed with a 90mm gun, the same gun I talked about being featured on the Alva Saladin in the last video on British Scout tanks. As such, it would fire basically the same rounds, an APFSDS round almost as powerful as that found on the AMX-10RC, although remember that this one has a lower propellant behind it, so it's going to have a lower velocity and lower penetration. This armoured car does travel though at a good 30 km per hour faster than the Alva Saladin or AMX-10RC, so I think it'd be good for an 8.3 BR, probably alongside the AMX-10. I think it should be moved up there if it gets access to scouting, which once again I think it should, alongside the other top tier wheeled tank destroyers. This vehicle, the AML-90 Lynx, is kind of more similar to a tank destroyer than it is a light tank, but considering that all the other wheeled tank destroyers, including the Vickers Viper I brought up last episode, mount 105mm L7 based cannons, while this tank uses only a 90mm gun, I thought it was safe to put in this list, and I think it would go into the light tank line, rather than precede the AMX-10RC for example. Anyway, that's it for our list of French light tanks, scout tanks and armoured cars that could potentially be added in, along with, well, let's be honest, half the video was going back over my proposed rework to the scouting mechanic, and please make sure to let me know what you think of that rework. Now, there are several other options for vehicles that could come into the game. For example, there were ELCs fitted with SS-11 ATGMs or even recoilless rifles, and what I do want to do right now is sidle into this video, even though it doesn't really fit, a whole bunch of potential SPAA for the French tech tree. Number 1, the AMX-13 VTT DCA, which mounted 4 20mm cannons similarly to the Whirlwind, and given that it had a 25% higher rate of fire than the Whirlwind, would likely sit at 4.0 or even 4.3. There's also the Panhard AML S530, which mounted 2 of these cannons, therefore it had a 25% lower rate of fire than the Whirlwind, very similarly to the British Crusader AA vehicle, and would probably come in at BR 3.3. The Crusader AA really belongs at 3.0 to 3.3, it's nowhere near as good as the Verbal. There's also the Panhard M3 VDA, which was usually outfitted with radar, but it did come without the radar, and this featured 2 20mm cannons, very high rate of fire. I think this would make a good 5.0 SPAA, maybe 5.3. The AMX-13 Rafaga, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but this is an AMX-13 fitted with a turret of an M42 Duster, which could make a good 6.3 AA. I really think the Duster could be down tier to 6.3 as well. There's no reason for it to be that much higher than the M19. And perhaps the Rafaga could be an event vehicle, similarly to the Chinese Type 65, which the Russians got as a winter event reward, I believe. Lastly, there's the AMX-13 DCA prototype, which is an AMX-13 hull fitted with the DCA turret we have in game at 8.0 on the AMX-30 DCA. However, this prototype version of this air defense system was not fitted with radar, and therefore it would be a very good comparator to the British Falcon, which both of them should probably be 7.3. The Falcon should not be 7.7. That would actually let the British use the Falcon, as currently we don't have a single 7.7 British vehicle. The AMX-13 DCA would also take the spot of the AMX-30 DCA, which really belongs in Tier 6, not Tier 5, with the rest of the radar-equipped anti-air vehicles. And I really think any or all of these machines could come in. France really needs some new AA vehicles. They have that Tier 1 piece of shit, the tractor, then 2 vehicles fitted with a single Bofors cannon, really not that great, and then nothing else until battle rating 8.0 with a radar AA. Anyway, that wasn't even meant to be part of this video. I just thought I'd bring it up as an extra little bit on the end, but besides that, that's going to do us for this video. Please leave a like if you did enjoy it, subscribe and hit that notification bell, join the 360 squad, and definitely be sure to let me know your thoughts on this video down in the comment section below, for both the rework to scouting, what you think of the new mechanics, and if you'd like to see that sort of scouting playstyle, and what you think about these suggested light vehicles. The Panhard EBR is such a well-known vehicle, I'm honestly very surprised that we don't already have it, and I really think it should come. It would be really interesting to play. But what I do want to say is that I started out with the British because they kind of need scout cars the most of all the nations, so I think that one big patch giving us a bunch of British scout vehicles all at the same time and the reworked scout mechanic would be really awesome, while vehicles like the EBRs and such could be filtered in gradually patch by patch, along with potential new vehicles of this type for every nation, which we will be covering in future episodes of the series. I'm going to make a playlist for this series. We're going to do a big series of potential armoured car additions. I really find it interesting. I love the armoured car playstyle in game, following the roads and scouting vehicles and being a strategic use to your team while not actually being the brunt of an attacking force. It's really fun, guys. Give it a try. It's really helped me, I guess, find a new spin on War Thunder. Was that a pun? Does that count as a pun? I don't know if that counts as a pun. I didn't mean for it to. Anyway, please come follow me over on Twitter and Twitch, join the Discord and check out Patreon, or hit that join button here on YouTube if you'd like to support the channel further and access some unique rewards. Thank you to all you lads for watching this very long video. If you're still watching here at the end, type Viva la Koala into the comments section below, and always remember to keep your bagpipes to hand, your kilt on, and I'll see you lads in the next video. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting me on Patreon. Captain Fubar, DA261, Gisli Gadarson, and Dark Recon. You lads are bra. If you wish to join them, come check out the link in the description below.